Captain Lisa Grant stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the cold metal floor of Kronos 7. The space station hummed with activity as dozens of alien species moved through the corridors. She pulled her uniform jacket straight and checked her watch. The peace talks would begin in 30 minutes. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison walked beside her, carrying a briefcase full of diplomatic documents. Behind them, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Susan Hayes followed with her medical kit. The three humans looked small compared to the massive aliens around them. "Remember," Grant said quietly, "we're here to make peace, not war. The Zeltharians have agreed to talk." "That's more than we expected after the battles at Sector 7. Morrison nodded, but his face showed worry. "Captain, the reports say these aliens don't respect weakness. What if they see our peace offer as surrender?" Grant stopped, walking, and looked at him. "Then we show them that humans can be strong without being cruel. We've survived 3 major attacks from them." "That should prove something." They reached the diplomatic wing of the station. The corridors here were wider and decorated with symbols for many worlds. Grant could smell the different atmospheres that each species needed to breathe. Some aliens wore breathing masks, while others had modified the air around them. A station officer approached them. He was from a species Grant didn't recognize, with blue skin and 4 arms. "Captain Grant? The Zeltharian delegation is waiting in Conference Room Alpha. They arrived an hour ago." "Thank you," Grant replied. She turned to her team. "Jake, remember what we discussed about their honor culture. Susan, stay close in case anyone needs medical attention. These talks could get heated." They walked down a long hallway lined with windows that showed the stars outside. Grant could see several ships docked at the station. The largest one was clearly Zeltharian, covered in dark metal with weapon systems visible along its hull. Conference Room Alpha was enormous. The ceiling stretched high above them, and the walls were painted with scenes of peace treaties from across the galaxy. A long table sat in the center of the room with chairs designed for different alien body types. The Zeltharian delegation was already seated on one side of the table. Grant counted 12 of them, all wearing dark uniforms with metal armor pieces. They were tall, at least 8 feet each, with gray skin and sharp features. Their eyes glowed with a pale yellow light. At the head of their delegation sat War Commander Vexthal. Grant recognized him from intelligence reports. His face was covered with scars from old battles, and his left arm had been replaced with a mechanical one. He watched the humans enter with the look of a predator. Studying prey, Grant walked to the other side of the table and sat down across from Vexthal. Morrison and Hayes took seats on either side of her. The size difference was obvious. The humans looked like children sitting at an adult table. "War Commander Vexthal," Grant said, standing and offering a slight bow. "Thank you for agreeing to these talks. I am Captain Lisa Grant of the United Earth Forces." Vexthal did not stand. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel being crushed. "You are smaller than I expected, human. Your species killed 300 of my warriors at Kepler Station. I thought you would send someone more impressive." Grant felt Morrison tense beside her, but she kept her voice calm. "Size doesn't determine courage, War Commander. We've learned that fighting leads only to more fighting. That's why we're here." "Fighting leads to victory," Vexthal replied. "The strong survive. The weak become slaves or die. This has always been the way." Grant sat back down and opened the folder in front of her. "We propose a different way. Both our species are strong. Both have proven that in battle. But strength can be used to build instead of destroy." The other Zeltharians whispered among themselves in their own language. Grant caught a few words she recognized from her studies. They were not complimentary. Vexthal held up his mechanical hand for silence. "You speak of building, Captain Grant. What do you offer to build with us?" Grant pulled out a data pad and placed it on the table. "Trade agreements? Scientific cooperation? Shared defense against the real threats in this sector? The Void Hunters have been attacking both our territories. Together, we could stop them." "The Void Hunters are insects," Vexthal said with a dismissive wave. We crush them when they appear. We need no help from humans.
Then why have they destroyed 2 of your mining colonies in the past month?
Morrison asked. The room went silent. Several Zeltharians reached for weapons that weren't there. Vexthal's eyes narrowed to glowing slits. Careful, human, Vexthal growled. Your words approach insult.
Grant shot Morrison a warning look.
What my colleague means is that the Void Hunters are becoming bolder. They attack when we're fighting each other. Working together would make both our people safer. Vexthal leaned forward. Safety is not our goal, Captain. Honor is our goal. Glory is our goal. Your people hide behind walls and make machines to fight for you. Where is the honor in that? We fight when we must, Grant replied, but we prefer to solve problems without killing. That takes a different kind of courage. It takes cowardice, said another Zeltharian. He was younger than Vexthal, but just as scarred. You fear true combat. Grant felt her temper rise, but pushed it down. We've proven in battle that we don't fear you. 3 times your fleets have attacked our colonies. 3 times we've driven you back. That's not cowardice. The room erupted, as several Zeltharians began shouting at once. Vexthal slammed his mechanical fist on the table, creating a loud clang that silenced everyone. Enough, he commanded. Then he looked directly at Grant. You claim your people are brave. You claim they are strong. But you sit here asking for peace like a defeated enemy begging for mercy. Grant stood up slowly. We're not defeated, War Commander. We're offering partnership because it's the smart choice. But if you prefer war, we can give you war. Vexthal's eyes lit up with something that might have been respect. Better? Much better, Captain. But words are easy. Actions prove truth. He stood as well, towering over the human captain. In our culture, disputes are settled by combat. The strong lead. The weak follow. If you truly believe your people are worthy of partnership, prove it. Grant felt her heart racing. What kind of proof do you want? Single combat. You and I, if you win, we will consider your proposals. If I win, your people will accept our terms for surrender. The other humans in the room looked shocked. Hayes started to protest, but Grant held up a hand to stop her. And what are your terms for surrender? Grant asked. Vexthal smiled, showing sharp teeth. 3 human colonies as tribute. Your military technology shared freely. Your strongest warriors to serve in our armies. Morrison jumped to his feet. Captain, you can't seriously consider this. Grant ignored him, keeping her eyes on Vexthal. And if I win? Then we will listen to your proposals with open minds. We will negotiate. As equals. Captain, Hayes whispered urgently, look at him. He's twice your size and covered in armor. This is suicide. Grant studied the alien warrior across from her. She could see the scars that marked him as a veteran of countless battles. His mechanical arm probably had built-in weapons. Every logical part of her mind screamed that this was impossible. But she also saw something else in his eyes. A test. He wasn't just challenging her to combat. He was challenging humanity's right to be treated as equals. I accept, Grant said. The room went silent again. Vexthal nodded slowly, and for the first time, he looked at her with something approaching respect. The combat will take place in 1 hour in the station's arena. Choose your weapons, Captain Grant. Choose them well. As the Zeltharian delegation filed out of the room, Morrison grabbed Grant's arm. Lisa, this is insane. He'll kill you in seconds. Grant looked at her friend and longtime colleague. Maybe, but if I don't fight, he'll never respect us. And without respect, there can be no peace. She picked up her datapad and headed for the door. Come on, I need to prepare. Captain Grant stood in the small preparation room next to the arena. She had changed into her combat uniform and checked her weapons 3 times. A standard plasma rifle hung across her back, and a sidearm rested in the holster at her hip. The gear felt light compared to what she knew Vexthal would be wearing. Dr. Hayes paced back and forth, her medical scanner in hand. Your heart rate is too high, Lisa. You need to calm down or you'll burn out before the fight even starts. I'm fine, Susan, Grant replied, though her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her equipment belt. Just nervous energy. Morrison sat on a bench with his head in his hands. There has to be another way. We could call for backup. The Earth fleet could be here in 6 hours. Grant shook her head. And then we'd have a war instead of a fight. Jake, you know, this is the only chance we have. If I back down now, Vexthel, we'll never see humans as anything but cowards. Through the thick walls, they could hear the crowd gathering in the arena. News of the combat had spread quickly throughout the station. Representatives from dozens of species were coming to watch. Some had probably never seen a human before. A station officer knocked on the door. Captain Grant? Grant took a deep breath and picked up her helmet. She looked at her 2 friends and colleagues. If something happens to me, make sure the recording gets back to Earth. Command needs to know we tried. Hayes grabbed her arm. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to win this and make history. Susan's right, Morrison added, though his voice didn't sound convinced. You're the best tactical fighter in the fleet. Use your brain, not your muscles. Grant smiled at both of them. Take care of yourselves. That's an order. She walked out of the preparation room and down a long corridor, toward the arena. The walls were lined with viewing windows where aliens of all shapes and sizes pressed against the glass to get a look at her. Some pointed and whispered. Others just stared. The arena was massive. The floor was made of smooth metal plates, and the ceiling stretched up at least 50 feet. Rows of seats surrounded the fighting area, and every seat was full. Grant had never seen so many different species in one place. She stepped onto the arena floor and immediately felt small. The space was designed for much larger beings than humans. Each metal plate was the size of a small room. Banks of lights hung overhead, casting harsh shadows across the ground. On the other side of the arena, a large door slid open. Vexthel emerged, and the crowd erupted in cheers and war cries. He wore full ceremonial armor that covered him from head to toe. The metal was black with silver markings that told the story of his victories in battle. His helmet had a tall crest that made him look even taller. In his hands, he carried a weapon that Grant didn't recognize. It looked like a combination of an energy rifle and a sword with a long barrel and a curved blade extending from the front. Blue energy crackled along its length. Vexthel walked to the center of the arena and raised his weapon above his head. The crowd cheered louder. He then began a series of movements that Grant realized was a traditional Zeltharian war dance. Each step was precise and powerful, showing off his skill and strength. Grant walked to her position about 30 feet away. From him, she looked tiny in comparison, like a child playing soldier. Her simple combat uniform and basic weapons seemed primitive next to his elaborate gear. A voice echoed through the arena's speakers, translating into multiple languages. The challenge has been accepted. Combat will continue until one warrior yields or falls. There are no other rules. Honor to the victorious. Vexthel finished his war dance and pointed his weapon at Grant. Are you ready to die for your weak species, human? Grant raised her plasma rifle to her shoulder. I'm ready to live for them. The arena lights dimmed except for a bright circle around the 2 fighters. In the sudden quiet, Grant could hear her own heartbeat. She could also hear the breathing of thousands of aliens watching from the seats above. A tone sounded, signaling the start of combat. Vexthel immediately began moving in a wide circle around Grant, his weapon held ready. She turned to keep him in sight, her rifle tracking his movement. He was faster than she expected for someone so large and heavily armored. He fired first. A bolt of blue energy shot across the arena, missing Grant by inches as she dove to the side. The energy blast hit the arena wall behind her. Leaving a smoking crater in the metal, Grant rolled to her feet and returned fire. Her plasma bolt struck Vexthel's chest armor and scattered harmlessly. The ceremonial armor was tougher than it looked. For the next several minutes, they circled each other like predators. Vexthel fired repeatedly, his shots getting closer. Each time, Grant dodged and weaved, using her smaller size to stay mobile. She aimed for joints in his armor and gaps in his helmet, but every shot was blocked or deflected. The crowd was on its feet now, cheering for every near miss and successful dodge. Grant realized that many of them had probably bet on how quickly she would lose. She was determined to make them lose their money. Vexthal stopped circling and charged directly at her. His weapon's blade extended further, crackling with energy. Grant waited until the last second, then rolled between his legs and came up behind him. She fired 3 quick shots at the back of his armor. The plasma bolts staggered him but didn't penetrate. He spun around faster than Grant thought possible and swung his weapon like a club. She barely ducked under the blade, feeling the energy. Burned the air above her head. They separated again, both breathing hard. Grant's uniform was soaked with sweat, and Vexthal's armor was scorched in several places. Neither had landed a decisive blow. "You fight better than expected, human," Vexthal called out. "But you cannot win with those weak weapons." Grant didn't reply. She was studying his movement pattern, looking for weaknesses. His left knee seemed to favor his right when he turned. His mechanical arm moved slightly slower than his natural one. She filed away every detail. Vexthal raised his weapon for another charge. The blue energy along the blade grew brighter, and Grant could hear a high whining sound building. He was preparing for a finishing move. He rushed forward again, but this time he zigzagged unpredictably. Grant couldn't anticipate where he would be when she fired. She waited, her finger on the trigger, looking for an opening. The whining sound from his weapon grew louder, too loud. Grant suddenly realized something was wrong. The energy buildup was beyond normal levels. The weapon was overloading. She tried to shout a warning, but it was too late. The weapon exploded in Vexthal's hands. The blast threw him backward across the arena floor. Pieces of shrapnel flew in all directions like deadly meteors. The crowd screamed and ducked for cover. Grant felt something hot punch through her chest. She looked down and saw a piece of twisted metal sticking out of her uniform. Blood was already soaking through the fabric around it. She tried to stay on her feet, but her legs wouldn't support her. She fell to her knees, then onto her side. The arena floor felt cold against her cheek. The pain hit her like a wave. She could taste blood in her mouth and feel it pooling beneath her. Her vision started to blur around the edges, through the ringing. In her ears, she could hear footsteps running toward her. Dr. Hayes's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Lisa, stay with me. Don't you dare close your eyes." Grant tried to speak, but only blood came out. She could see Hayes working over her, medical instruments flashing in the arena lights. Morrison was there too, talking rapidly into his communicator. Across the arena, other medics were helping Vexthal to his feet. He looked shaken but not seriously injured. His armor had protected him from the worst of the explosion. Grant's vision grew darker. The sounds around her became muffled and distant. She could feel her heart slowing down, each beat weaker than the last. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Vexthal standing over her. His helmet was off, and his scarred face showed an expression she couldn't read. It might have been respect. It might have been regret. Then there was nothing. Dr. Susan Hayes pressed her hands against the gaping wound in Captain Grant's chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Blood seeped between her fingers no matter how much pressure she applied. The piece of metal had torn through Grant's lung and damaged major blood vessels. "Get me to the medical bay now," Hayes shouted at the station medics who had arrived with a stretcher. "She's losing too much blood." Morrison helped lift Grant onto the stretcher. Her face was pale white and her breathing was shallow and rapid. "Is she going to make it?" he asked, but Hayes didn't answer. She was too busy trying to keep Grant alive long enough to reach proper medical equipment. As they rushed through the station corridors, she could hear Grant's heart monitor beeping slower and slower. Behind them, the arena was in chaos. The crowd was leaving quickly, many of them talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. Some seemed disappointed that the fight had ended so suddenly. Others appeared shocked by the violence. War-Commander Vexthal stood in the center of the arena, looking at the bloodstain where Grant had fallen. His weapon lay in pieces around him, destroyed by the explosion. Several other Zeltharians approached him, speaking in their own language. "The human fought with honor," one of them said. "Her death was not your fault." Vexthal removed his damaged helmet and set it on the ground. "She should not have died this way. Equipment failure brings no glory to either warrior." In the medical bay, Hayes worked frantically to save Grant's life. The station's medical facilities were designed for multiple alien species, but human anatomy was not well understood here. She had to adapt equipment meant for beings twice Grant's size. "I need more blood substitute," she called to a medical assistant, "and get me the emergency surgery kit from our shuttle." Morrison paced outside the medical bay, unable to watch. He could hear the sounds of the surgery through the door, the hum of medical scanners, the beeping of life support machines, and Hayes giving rapid instructions to her assistants. Every few minutes, the beeping would slow down or stop completely. Then Hayes would shout commands and the beeping would resume. Morrison knew that his captain was dying and coming back to life. Repeatedly on the operating table, word of Grant's condition spread throughout the station. The Zeltharian delegation prepared to leave, assuming the combat was finished and their victory was clear. Some of the alien observers began making plans to evacuate before human military forces arrived seeking revenge. "Sir," a communications officer approached Morrison. "We're receiving messages from Earth Command. They want a full report on the captain's status." Morrison looked through the medical bay window. Grant lay motionless on the operating table, surrounded by machines keeping her alive. "Tell them she's fighting for her life. That's all we know right now." Inside the medical bay, Hayes was losing the battle. Grant's heart had stopped 3 times in the past hour. Each time, Hayes had managed to restart it, but the intervals were getting longer. The shrapnel had caused much internal damage. "Doctor," one of the medical assistants said quietly, "her brain activity is dropping. We're losing her." Hayes checked the monitors. Grant's brainwaves were almost flat. Her blood pressure was nearly 0 despite the artificial support systems. By every medical standard, she should already be dead. "No," Hayes said firmly, "not yet. Increase the oxygen flow and give me the neural stimulator." She placed the stimulator against Grant's forehead and activated it. Electric pulses flowed into Grant's brain, trying to restart the neural pathways that controlled her basic life functions. The monitors showed no change. Grant's heart remained still. Her breathing had stopped completely. Hayes tried again with the stimulator, increasing the power. Still nothing. She looked at the clock on the wall. Grant had been clinically dead for 8 minutes. After 10 minutes, brain damage would be permanent even if they could restart her heart. "Doctor," the assistant said gently, "maybe it's time to ... "No," Hayes interrupted. "She's the strongest person I know. If anyone can come back from this, it's Lisa Grant." She prepared the cardiac stimulator and placed it over Grant's heart. This was her last chance. If this didn't work, Grant would be gone forever. Morrison pressed his face against the window, watching his friend fight for life. In the arena, Vextol had dismissed his delegation and was walking toward the medical bay. Other aliens throughout? The station monitored the situation, many placing new bets on whether the human would survive. Hayes activated the cardiac stimulator. Grant's body jerked as electricity coursed through her chest. The heart monitor remained flat. She tried again with more power. Nothing. 12 minutes, the assistant said, looking at the clock. Hayes ignored him and tried a third time. This time she used maximum power, enough to potentially damage Grant's heart permanently if she survived. It was a desperate move, but Hayes was out of options. Grant's body convulsed on the table. The monitors flickered. Then suddenly, a single beep echoed through the medical bay. Another beep. Then another. Grant's heart was beating again. Hayes quickly checked the other monitors. Brain activity was returning. Blood pressure was rising. Grant was breathing on her own, though weakly. "She's back," Hayes whispered, hardly believing it herself. "She's actually back." Morrison burst through the medical bay doors. "Is she okay? Is she going to live?" Hayes was still staring at the monitors in amazement. "I don't know how, but yes. Her vital signs are stabilizing. The internal bleeding has stopped. She should be dead, but she's not." Grant's eyes fluttered open. She looked around the medical bay, confused and disoriented. When she tried to speak, only a whisper came out. "Easy," Hayes said, leaning over her patient. "You've been through major trauma. Don't try to talk yet." Grant ignored the advice. "How long?" she managed to ask. "How long what?" Morrison asked, taking her hand. "How long was I dead?" Hayes and Morrison exchanged glances. 12 minutes, Hayes answered honestly. Your heart stopped for 12 minutes. Grant processed this information slowly. In many alien cultures, death and resurrection were deeply significant events. She knew enough about Zaltharian beliefs to understand what this might mean. The negotiations, she said, her voice getting stronger. What happened to the talks? Morrison looked uncomfortable. Lisa, Vextel thinks the combat is over. His delegation is preparing to leave. They expect us to accept their surrender terms? Grant struggled to sit up despite Hayes trying to keep her lying down. No, the fight isn't over. It can't be over. You died, Lisa, Morrison said gently. Even by their honor code, that has to count as a defeat. Grant shook her head weakly. Not if I came back. Jake, help me understand their death customs. What does resurrection mean to them? Morrison thought for a moment. I remember reading something about warriors who return from the dead. They believe. Such people have been judged worthy by their ancestors and sent back to complete important tasks. Grant smiled for the first time since the combat began. Then the fight continues. I need to speak with Vextel immediately. Hayes put a firm hand on Grant's shoulder. You're not going anywhere. You've lost too much blood and your body is still in shock. You need at least 24 hours of recovery. We don't have 24 hours, Grant replied. Every minute we wait, the chance for peace gets smaller. Susan, I know my own body. I can do this. Through the medical bay window, they could see War Commander Vextel approaching. He had removed most of his armor and looked less intimidating than before. His scarred face showed an expression of curiosity mixed with something that might have been respect. Morrison opened the door to let him in. The large alien had to duck to fit through the human-sized doorway. Vextel approached Grant's bed slowly, as if he was seeing a ghost. You were dead, he said simply. I watched you die. Grant met his gaze steadily. I was, now I'm not. What does that mean in your culture? Vextel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Less aggressive, more thoughtful. It means you have been chosen. The ancestors have sent you back for a purpose. The purpose is peace, Grant said. Not victory for either side, but peace for both sides. Vextel nodded slowly. Perhaps. But there are things you must understand about what happened in the arena. My weapon's failure has brought shame upon me. By Zaltharian law, I face exile. When I return to my people, Grant saw an opportunity. What if neither of us won? What if we both lost, but we both gained something more important? She extended her hand toward the alien warrior. Help me up, we have work to do. Captain Grant leaned heavily on Morrison's arm as they walked back toward the conference room. Her legs felt weak, and every step sent pain through her chest where the shrapnel had pierced her. Dr. Hayes followed close behind. Medical scanner in hand, ready to help if Grant collapsed again. War Commander Vextel walked beside them, his heavy footsteps echoing in the corridor. He had said little since leaving the medical bay, but Grant could see him watching her carefully. She knew he was trying to understand what her return from death meant. Tell me about your weapon, Grant said as they walked. That wasn't a normal malfunction, was it? Vextel's jaw tightened. The blade was my grandfather's, and his grandfather's before him. It has been carried into battle for 300 years without failure. But today it failed, Grant observed. What does that mean in your culture? Vextel stopped walking. The others stopped too, waiting for his answer. It means I am no longer worthy to carry it. The ancestors have withdrawn their blessing from me. Grant studied his scarred face. Or maybe they were trying to tell you something different. Maybe they wanted both of us to learn something. They reached the conference room where the Zaltharian delegation was waiting. The other aliens looked, surprised to see Grant walking and talking. Many had probably expected her to be dead by now. Grant took her seat across from the delegation, though she had to grip the table edge to keep from swaying. Morrison and Hayes sat on either side of her, ready to support her if needed. I have returned from death, Grant said to the assembled Zaltharians. In your culture, what does this mean? The aliens whispered among themselves in their own language. An older Zeltharian with white markings on his armor spoke up. It means you have been judged and found worthy by our ancestors. You have been sent back to complete an important task. Grant nodded. And what about a warrior whose ancestral weapon fails him in honorable combat? What does that mean? The same Zeltharian answered, but his voice was more hesitant. It can mean the ancestors have withdrawn their support. Such a warrior faces exile and shame. Or, Grant said carefully, it could mean the ancestors wanted to teach both warriors that combat itself was not the answer to their problem. Vexthel leaned forward. Explain this thinking, human. Grant took a deep breath, ignoring the pain in her chest. Your weapon destroyed itself rather than harm me directly. My death came from an accident, not from your skill or my weakness. Neither of us truly won or lost the combat. She looked around the table at the alien faces watching her. Maybe the ancestors were telling us that we should not be fighting each other at all. Maybe they want us to fight together against something else. Fight against what? Asked the younger Zeltharian who had spoken rudely during the first meeting. Against the real threats to both our peoples, Grant replied. The void hunters who attack our colonies. The resource shortages that force us to compete instead of cooperate. The misunderstanding that makes us see each other as enemies instead of potential allies. Morrison placed a datapad on the table. Captain, the latest reports came in while you were in surgery. The Void Hunters hit 3 more systems yesterday. 2 Zeltharian mining operations and 1 human research station. Grant picked up the datapad with shaking hands. They're getting bolder because we're distracted fighting each other. Every ship we use against each other is a ship that can't defend against the real enemy. Vexthel examined the reports on his own device. These attacks are coordinated. The Void Hunters are using our conflict to their advantage. Exactly, Grant said. They know that as long as humans and Zeltharians are at war, neither of us can focus on stopping them. The older Zeltharian spoke again. Even if this is true, how do we know we can trust humans? Your species is weak. You avoid direct combat. How can we rely on you as allies? Grant felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. With respect, sir, I just died fighting your strongest warrior. I came back from death to continue working for peace. If that's weakness, then I'm proud to be weak. Hayes leaned over and whispered urgently in Grant's ear. Your heart rate is spiking. You need to stay calm or you'll collapse again. Grant nodded but continued speaking to the Zeltharians. Our species are different, but that doesn't make either of us weak. Humans are good at things you might not value. We're good at building, at healing, at finding solutions that don't require killing. Those are not warrior skills, the young Zeltharian objected. They are survival skills, Grant replied. And right now, survival is what matters most. Vexthel had been quiet during this exchange, studying the data about the Void Hunter attacks. Now he looked up at Grant with a thoughtful expression. You spoke of fighting together. What would such cooperation look like? Grant felt a spark of hope. Your ships are strong and fast. Ours are better at long-range detection and communication. Together we could track the Void Hunters more effectively and respond to their attacks faster. Morrison added, human medical. Technology could help treat wounded Zeltharian warriors. Zeltharian weapons technology could improve our defense systems. But the most important thing, Grant continued, is that working together sends a message to the Void Hunters and any other threats out there. It tells them that this sector is protected by 2 strong species who will defend each other. The Zeltharian delegation discussed this in their own language for several minutes. Grant couldn't understand most of what they were saying, but she could tell the conversation was intense. Some voices were raised in argument while others spoke more quietly. Finally, Vexthel called for silence. There is wisdom in your words, Captain Grant, but cooperation requires trust. How do we build trust between species that have been at war? Grant looked at the alien warrior who had nearly killed her an hour ago. We start small. Joint patrols. In the border systems where Void Hunter attacks are most common. shared intelligence about their movements, medical and technical exchanges, and if one side betrays the other? Asked the older Zeltharian. Then we're no worse off than we are now, Grant replied. But if we succeed, both our peoples become safer and stronger. Hayes checked her scanner and frowned. Captain, your blood pressure is dropping again. You really need rest. Grant waved her off. I'm fine for a few more minutes. She turned back to Vexthal. There's something else we need to discuss. Your weapon failure has put you in a difficult position with your own people. Vexthal's expression darkened. That is my burden to bear. It does not affect these negotiations. But it does, Grant insisted. If you return home in disgrace, you can't help implement any agreement we make here. Your people might reject everything we've discussed. What do you suggest? Vexthal asked warily. Grant took a deep breath. I suggest we reframe what happened. In the arena, you didn't lose because your weapon failed. We both discovered something more important than victory or defeat. She gestured to the datapad showing the Void Hunter attacks. Your ancestors destroyed your weapon not to shame you, but to open your eyes to the real enemy. They wanted you to see that fighting me was a waste of your strength when greater threats exist. The room was quiet as the Zeltharians considered this interpretation. Grant could see them thinking, weighing her words against their cultural beliefs. Vexthal spoke slowly. You are saying that my apparent shame could become honor if I return with a treaty that protects both our peoples from the real threats. I'm saying that sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones who know when to stop fighting and when to start building, Grant replied. Morrison placed another datapad on the table. We've prepared a preliminary cooperation agreement. It covers joint defense, intelligence sharing, and limited trade arrangements. Nothing binding yet, just a framework for future negotiations. Grant pushed the datapad toward Vexthal. This is what I came back from death to offer you. Not surrender, not conquest, but partnership between equals. Vexthal picked up the datapad and began reading. The other Zeltharians leaned over to see it as well. Grant watched their faces carefully, looking for signs of acceptance or rejection. After several minutes, Vexthal looked up at her. This proposal has merit. But before my people will accept it, they must see proof that humans can be trusted as allies. What kind of proof? Morrison asked. Vexthal smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely friendly. The kind that can only be demonstrated in action. We will need to fight together against a common enemy. Grant felt her heart racing again, but this time it was from excitement rather than medical crisis. The Void Hunters. The Void Hunters, Vexthal agreed. If human and Zeltharian ships can work together to defeat them, then trust will be built through shared victory. Grant extended her hand across the table. Then we have an agreement in principle. Vexthal reached out with his mechanical hand and grasped hers firmly. We have an agreement, Captain Grant. May it bring honor to both our peoples. 3 hours later, Captain Grant stood at the edge of the same arena where she had nearly died. The bloodstains had been cleaned from the metal floor, and new lighting had been installed for the ceremony. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the seats, all wanting to witness what many were calling the most important peace treaty in galactic history. Dr. Hayes finished adjusting Grant's dress uniform and stepped back to examine her work. You still look pale, but at least you're standing on your own. Grant touched the bandages hidden beneath her uniform jacket. I feel better than I should after being dead for 12 minutes. Maybe dying and coming back gives you extra strength. Morrison approached carrying a small device. The recording equipment is ready. Earth Command will want to see every moment of this ceremony. Across the arena, the Zeltharian delegation was preparing for their part of the ceremony. War Commander. Vexthal wore his full dress armor, polished until it gleamed under the lights. But instead of carrying weapons, he held something that made Grant catch her breath. It was a banner. Not just any banner, but the sacred war standard of his clan. The fabric was deep red with silver symbols that told the story of countless battles. Grant knew from her studies that this banner had been carried into combat for over 500 years. He's really going to do it, Morrison said in amazement. He's going to let you carry the war standard. Grant nodded, still hardly believing it herself. When Vexthal had made the offer an hour ago, the other Zeltharians had been shocked into silence. Allowing an alien to carry their clan banner was something that had never happened before in their history.
It's not just symbolic,
Grant said. If I carry that banner, it means his clan accepts me as one of their own warriors. It's the highest honor they can give. Hayes checked her medical scanner one more time. Your vitals are stable, but don't push yourself too hard. Your body is still healing from massive trauma. A station official approached them. Captain Grant? It's time to begin the ceremony. Grant walked to the center of the arena, her footsteps echoing in the large space. The crowd grew quiet as she took her position. She could see alien journalists recording everything, and she knew that images of this moment would be broadcast across the galaxy. Vexthal entered from the opposite side, carrying both the Zeltharian war banner and a human flag that had been provided by the station authorities. He walked with the slow, ceremonial pace that his culture used for important rituals. When he reached the center of the arena, he stopped about 10 feet away from Grant. The two of them faced each other as they had during their combat, but this time there was no hostility between them. Captain Lisa Grant of the human species, Vexthal said in a voice that carried throughout the arena. You have proven yourself in honorable combat. You have died and returned with wisdom. Will you accept the responsibility of carrying our clan banner as a symbol of the alliance between our peoples? Grant felt the weight of the moment. Every eye in the arena was on her. Every alien species represented here would judge humanity based on what happened next. War Commander Vexthal of the Zeltharian Empire, she replied, her voice strong despite her injuries. I accept this honor on behalf of all humanity. I will carry your banner with the same courage and dedication that your warriors have shown for 500 years. Vexthal stepped forward and handed her the war banner. The fabric was heavier than she expected, made from materials she didn't recognize. The silver symbols seemed to shimmer in the arena lights. Then he handed her the human flag. And I will carry the banner of your people to show that Zeltharians and humans fight together as equals. The crowd erupted in cheers from dozens of different species. Some aliens stood and raised their arms in salutes from their own cultures. Others made sounds that might have been applause but came from throat structures very different from human ones. Grant lifted the Zeltharian banner high above her head. The red fabric unfurled completely, displaying the full story of the clan's battles. She had studied the symbols enough to recognize some of them. Here was the mark for their victory at the Battle of Twin Suns. There was the symbol for their defense of the outer colonies. Vexthal raised the human flag beside her. The blue, red, and white colors looked strange in his mechanical hand, but he held it with the same respect he would show his own banner. Together, they began to walk across the arena floor. This was the traditional march of victory that Zeltharian warriors performed after successful battles. But instead of one warrior celebrating triumph over an enemy, two former enemies walked together toward a shared future. The arena floor seemed much larger when walking slowly. Grant could feel the eyes of thousands of beings watching every step. Her chest ached where the shrapnel had torn through her. But she kept walking steadily. Halfway across the arena, something unexpected happened. A group of alien delegates from the Arcturian Council stood up in their seats and began clapping. Grant recognized them as a species that had been neutral in the human-Zeltharian conflict. The applause spread. More and more alien species joined in, until the entire arena was filled with the sounds of approval from dozens of different worlds. Grant had never heard anything like it. They're cheering for peace, Morrison said from his seat near the arena floor. When was the last time anyone cheered for peace instead of war? As Grant and Vexthal continued their march, the crowd began chanting. It started with the Zeltharians, calling out a battle cry in their own language. But instead of words about conquest and victory, they were chanting about honor and unity. The humans in the audience picked up the rhythm and began chanting their own words. Peace through strength, they called out. Strength through unity. Other.
Alien species added their own voices, each in their own language but all following the same rhythm. The sound built until the entire arena was filled with a chorus of dozens of different species, calling for unity and cooperation. Grant felt tears running down her cheeks. She had come to this station expecting difficult negotiations and possible failure. She had never imagined that her death and resurrection would lead to this moment of galactic unity. They reached the far end of the arena, where a platform had been set up for the signing ceremony. Grant and Vexel climbed the steps together. Still carrying each other's banners, on the platform waited the formal treaty documents, printed on special paper that would last for centuries. The agreement they had hammered out in the conference room had been expanded into a full alliance treaty covering defense, trade, scientific cooperation, and cultural exchange. Grant handed the Zeltharian banner to Vexel and took her place. At the signing table, the war commander set both banners in ceremonial stands behind the table where they would be visible during the signing. This treaty represents more than peace between humans and Zeltharians, Grant said as cameras recorded her words. It represents a new way of resolving conflicts in our galaxy. Instead of fighting until one side wins and the other loses, we have chosen to work together so that both sides can win. Vexel stepped up to the table beside her. The human captain speaks truth. Today we show that strength comes not from defeating enemies, but from turning enemies into allies. Grant picked up the signing stylus and added her name to the treaty. The ink was a special blend that would glow softly for the next 100 years. Making the signatures visible even in low light, Vexel signed next, using a Zeltharian ceremonial blade to carve his mark into the paper. The combination of human technology and Zeltharian tradition created a document that truly belonged to both species. As they finished signing, the crowd stood as one. The applause was deafening, echoing off the arena walls and ceiling. Grant looked out at the sea of alien faces, all celebrating the end of a war and the beginning of something new. Morrison and Hayes joined them on the platform, beaming with pride at their captain's achievement. Hayes leaned over and whispered, "Your heart rate is finally normal. I think dying and coming back to life actually fixed some of your stress problems." Grant laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. Maybe everyone should try it. Vexel overheard and made a sound that might have been Zeltharian laughter. I do not recommend dying as a negotiation tactic for most diplomats. The ceremony concluded with both banners being raised on poles above the platform. The Zeltharian war standard and the human flag flew side by side, visible to everyone in the arena. As the crowd began to leave, many aliens approached the platform to congratulate Grant and Vexel personally. Representatives from species that had never spoken to humans before expressed interest in opening diplomatic relations. "Captain Grant," said an ambassador from the Centauri Federation, "your example today will change how conflicts are resolved throughout this sector of space. Would humanity be interested in joining a larger coalition of peaceful species?" Grant looked at Vexel, who nodded encouragingly. "We would be honored to discuss it," she replied. As the arena finally emptied, Grant stood alone with the two banners flying above her. She thought about how different this moment was from the combat that had started. Everything just a few hours ago. She had been dropped instantly by a piece of flying metal. Now she stood carrying the banner of her former enemies in triumph. Sometimes